few weeks back when I landed Lahore, the next day I was on a dinner with one of the friend who is a famous cardiologist there. Why I'm narrating this story is basically to emphasize how important the peace is. And while we were on the dinner, we were discussing about a country which, we hardly talk about, that is Somalia. And he said, we used to go to Somalia in 1986 when his father was deputed there through the World Bank. His father was the Auditor General of Pakistan. And I was surprised to learn that in 1986, Somalia was a place where people would go for their summer vacation. But now, because I remained there for 3 years and the country is destroyed, there is hardly a place where people can go without the security escort. Like I was the head of office Mogadishu, and I still remember that without 4 or 5 armored cars, I could not go out. So that is the difference. If you don't have peace, it means you lose everything. It starts, I mean, that's why I narrated this whole story is uh, the countries I have worked so far, starting from New York up to the East African 5 countries, Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, Congo, and then the neighboring country, Kenya. There's a huge difference in Kenya and remaining 5 countries because Kenya is a peaceful country. And once Somalia used to be the biggest power in the whole region. So that is the difference. That's how things impact. And the same stories we had been hearing about Afghanistan, that late 70s, people would go to Kabul as now people go to Dubai. So you can imagine that if you don't have peace, how it affects the economy, how it affects the social fabric of the society, and how it affects the overall education and health system, and all your institutions are being destroyed. Now coming to the specifics, what is the need of the hour in Pakistan and what do we need? In my personal humble capacity, I would say that we need to work right from the bottom up approach. We might come up with some very big policies, but unless and until we start from the scratch, from the basis, we won't be able to bring peace. We need peace at a village level, tehsil level, district level, and at the provincial level. If you look at your province, Balochistan or the FATA, why they are behind? Because there is no peace. And there could be multiple factors where external powers are playing, your regional powers are playing, but at the same time, you might have observed the internal conflicts within the countries, within the regions, and within the families. That also takes you back. You might have seen that one tribe pitching up against another tribe. Where does it lead? The whole youth of that tribe is not going to the schools because there is a conflict which is going on. They are going to the courts every day fighting their cases. So the whole energy is being utilized to plan and to counter their the opponents, rather than focusing on their education, focusing on their career and how to move on. Now, linking it to what is the role of the UN? In UN, in 1994, there was a genocide in Rwanda. Some of you might have heard. And the peacekeepers over there could not act in time. And that has led to the massive killing within the two tribes. After that, the mandate of the UN has been changed from reactive to preventive. That's why we use a term called preventive diplomacy. So basically, how does preventive diplomacy work is that you have to, through the early warning system, you have to identify some problem, how it's happening and how it is going to occur. So before that conflict actually happens, you are already ready to prevent it through your backdoor diplomacy, through your good offices, and through your active engagement. You curtail the parties not to fight. I would say that is what is needed. We need a harmony between the federal government and the provincial governments. Sometimes small little impediments stop the major developments within the provinces, within the federal level. That now your provincial government is not cooperating with the federal government is not cooperating with the provincial government. One tribe is not willing to sit with the other tribe. So where does it lead? It would lead to disaster. I know we are talking about here about how to move things in the South Asia. But before moving on to South Asia, my humble request would be to the practitioners and to the people who are going to guide the policy, that tell the policymakers in Pakistan. I was with a meeting with the foreign minister 2 days ago, and one of the discussion point was this, that we have to resolve the internal conflicts. May it be a conflict with the PTM, Pashtun Tahafuz movement. May it be a conflict within Balochistan. We have to engage them politically rather than, military operation is not a solution. You can go with different approaches. Somewhere where you have to use force, per force, yes, but I have not seen a single conflict being resolved through force or through the gun barrel of the gun. So one way or the other, you will have to engage politically. We have already lost one Eastern Pakistan. I wish there could have been an active political engagement. We might have saved that. I don't want any other part of the country being excluded and being marginalized because of their views. We can have different point of views within our own houses, own families. But does that mean that we leave them alone? Does that mean that we don't engage them? Even a conflict between husband and wife, you might have observed that those families don't progress. Those children are mostly affected whose parents are fighting. Whereas when the parents are on the same page and they resolve their disagreements through discussions, their children are going to progress much more, and those families are more happy and prosperous. Same way, I would say the countries who are prosperous, they resolve their issues internally. External factors will always play and they'll keep playing. But what is the holistic approach is that we should be ready to engage them, to involve them, and to find solutions for them. Towards the end, I would say that in the UN, we have called a peace building commission. We have 32 members. Canada is chairing at the moment, and Pakistan, luckily, is member of the peace building commission. Being one of the leading contributor to the peacekeeping forces, so Pakistan is part of the peace building commission. Peace building usually have funds to give it to the different countries to engage locally to resolve their conflicts. So I would advise, I wish Minister would have been here and he could have heard what I'm saying, but I'm sure you guys will convey my message that the government should engage Peace Building Commission, try to get funds from there, and people like you who are on the panel now, who are listening to me, I'm sure all of you are the practitioners for the peace building. Utilize those funds, engage your communities, help them to resolve their conflicts. I have seen even the families within Punjab, where hundreds of people have been killed from each side, and there was no one to go and tell them, please stop it. Sometimes you need money, sometimes you just need a leadership. Play a role of that leader who can stop fighting within these small places, within the families, within these districts. One, you will feel satisfied. Second, you will do a work which our Prophet always liked. I mean, he used to forgive people. See Fatah Makkah, see Sulh Hudaybiyah. I mean, one of the opening speaker has already mentioned it. I'll not go into details. But the crux of the story is we can only achieve lasting peace through holistic approach and with the continued engagements. I have not seen parties reaching to the final goal in one or two sittings. We had been sitting some time for 26 time regular engagements between federal government and provincial government, and then towards the end, after 2 years, managed to find a solution on the electoral law. So the the basics is you need to have a lot of patience while you are engaging the parties as a practitioner. So with lot of patience, I'm sure you are going to achieve your goal.